Before I go to the third part, I just want to mention again the chlorofluorocarbons is a synthetic compound that is made by human, and there's no natural sources of CFCs, and it's really bad for the ozone layers and for the global warming. So most countries phase out CFC, and it's expected to be finished by 2020, which is this year. And there's some information from the textbook. There's more evidence about the carbon cycles and about human activities greatly increase of the concentration of carbon dioxide. And I just put these two slides for you to further reinforce your memory of those greenhouse gases and what they do and their characteristics. This is for your self-study. Now I want to talk about the global warming and the climate change. So global warming and climate change, they often mentioned together, but they're different. The global warming mainly refers to the average increase in temperature of the Earth's atmosphere. And the climate change is a bunch of things, okay, consequences happening after global warming. It doesn't has to be warming, but it's those events and those many other changes that come about because of global warming. And our knowledge in global warming and climate change is constantly growing. So how do we know about this? How do we know our Earth is warming and the climate is changing? The first thing is we measure the concentration of the carbon dioxide, and we study the gas bubbles trapped in glaciers, right? And we can use the satellite photos to study the path change. We can study the migration behaviors of animals. And we also measure the carbon dioxide content in the ocean water. And we measure the pH of the ocean water. So these are all the research related to climate change. This is a visual summary of what I just told you. We study the weather, we study the snow and ice patterns, we study the animal behaviors, and we study the ice cores. We study the ocean organisms. So our knowledge is growing, and this is the evidence of climate change. Changing growing seasons, the retreat of glaciers, and the effects of carbon dioxide elevation on photosynthesis. After you study Annenberg lesson, you will know the increase of carbon dioxide concentration doesn't mean the photosynthesis in the plants will be much more active. And we also observe wind patterns change, the change of the ocean currents. And those are very powerful redistribution of the temperature over the surface of the Earth, right? We study the particulate matters, sea level, and the frequency and the strength of tropical storms. It's more and more frequent, and it's getting stronger and stronger. And the current state of knowledge, we have this group of scientists, okay, they split in three groups. One is study the physical science, or the organization name is IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change. The group one scientists study the physical science that relates to climate change. There's a few hundreds of them, and there's hundreds of people contribute for the final report. And the group two scientists deal with the impacts of the climate change. They study the consequence. And the group three scientists deal with how to reduce the effects of the climate change. And this is their report 7 years ago. And they conclude human activity is clearly influencing climate. And we observe increase of carbon dioxide concentration, and we have clear evidence of the increased temperature all over the world. Okay, The average Earth's temperature is increasing since the Industrial Revolution, and the snow and ice was reducing in the northern part of the planet, and number of cold days decreased and number of warm days going up, and ice is melting in Arctic area and Antarctic area. We had this case study, the discussion, right? And the permafrost is melting, and the glaciers are melting. Arrival of spring is early in many parts of the world, and that causes allergy problem getting worse. And for the ocean, we observe more carbon dioxide emission ending up in ocean, and the drop of the pH of the ocean, and the more energy stored in ocean, and ocean temperature go up. In the first upper 70 meters of water, it go up half degree, and the sea level is going up. And some people may say half degree is nothing, but global wise it's a huge thing. Okay, a small increase in the temperature may seem trivial, but such increase could set in motion changes that could significantly alter the climate, and it caused the changes to hydrologic cycle, sea level, human health, etc. and etc. And some of the ecosystem, some area of the human beings can settle for the new change and some cannot. And the poor nations are facing bigger challenges than the developed nations, and put them in a more vulnerable place. And it is very interesting, Africa was identified as the most vulnerable to the impacts of projected changes. You know, in Africa, the soil is not very fertile. That's the first challenge they have, right? And then they have this challenge of rapid growth of populations, and then they facing this big challenge of climate change. So major risk resulting from climate change cause flooding, severe weather, right? Extremely hot days, extremely cold days, a long time of droughts. Those are all severe weather, or stronger hurricanes, stronger flooding. Death and illness. The heat waves killed a lot of people. Food insecurity affect our agriculture practices, right? And decrease the yield of the crops. Agricultural productivity goes down, and the loss of our ecosystems, and the loss of more ecosystem in marine and on the land. The first thing is a hydrologic cycle. It is, the water cycling on the earth is driven by sunshine, right? It's driven by energy. The primary source of energy is the temperature of the earth. Thus, a change in the earth's temperature is expected to change weather and climate. The higher temperatures resulted in increased evaporation. That will cause some areas to become very dry, while the increased moisture will be deposited in other areas. That means some of the other areas will experience heavier rain. So before the climate change, global warming, we have this nice natural pattern of temperature and precipitate change over the year. And now it's kind of being more extreme, okay? So it comes extremely drier or extremely wet, and that is not good. And the snowball patterns exposed to change, with some areas receiving more snow and others less. And especially when we have the El Nino events, that will make things even worse. So these are the evidence of the disruption of the hydrologic cycle. And some of the area will experiencing longer periods of droughts. And these areas are getting worse and worse, and Texas is within this area. and the flooding become worse and worse. And I'm going to discuss more in the next video.